My name is Rachelle Thompson, and at 67 years old, I never expected to be sitting at my own son James' Christmas dinner, watching everyone but me receive gifts. After losing my husband 15 years ago, I built a real estate empire from scratch while supporting James and his wife Bethany through every step of their lives. The relationship had grown strained over the years, despite my generosity. As I sat there with an empty lap while everyone tore into beautifully wrapped packages, I knew it was finally time to unwrap the truth about who really funded their lavish lifestyle. Where are you watching from today? Go ahead and like and subscribe to hear how I turned the tables on my ungrateful family in a way that left the entire room speechless. When my husband Frank died unexpectedly from a heart attack 15 years ago, he left me with modest savings and a mortgage nearly paid off on our simple 3-bedroom home in a middle-class neighborhood of Portland. We had never been wealthy, but we had been comfortable. Frank had worked as a high school math teacher, and I had been a part-time secretary at a local insurance company. Our son James was 25 at the time, just starting his career in marketing and living in his first apartment with 2 roommates. After the funeral, I found myself at a crossroads. The life insurance policy would keep me afloat for maybe a year, but after that I would need to figure something out. At 52, the prospect of building a new career seemed daunting, but necessity is a powerful motivator. A friend suggested I look into real estate. The market was beginning to recover from the recession, and properties in certain neighborhoods were selling below their potential value. With nothing to lose, I took some of our savings and enrolled in real estate courses. 6 months later, I had my license and a position at a small local agency. What nobody expected, least of all me, was that I would discover a natural talent for property assessment and negotiation. Within my first year, I had closed more sales than agents with 5 years of experience. I had an eye for properties with potential and a way of connecting with both buyers and sellers that built trust quickly. By year 3, I had saved enough commission to purchase my first investment property, a rundown duplex in an up-and-coming neighborhood. I renovated it myself, learning plumbing and basic electrical work from YouTube videos and handyman manuals. The rental income from that first property became the seed money for the next, and within 5 years I owned 7 rental properties and had started my own agency, Thompson Real Estate Solutions. During those early years, James was incredibly supportive. He would come over on weekends to help me paint or install flooring. He seemed proud of my growing success and would often tell his friends about his mom, the real estate mogul. When he met Bethany at a company event 7 years ago, everything seemed perfect at first. She was beautiful, educated, and came from what she called old money in Connecticut. Her father owned a chain of luxury car dealerships across the Northeast, and her mother came from a banking family. The first time I noticed the change in James was at their engagement dinner. Bethany parents, the Harrisons, hosted at an exclusive country club. When conversation turned to careers, Bethany's father asked about my work. As I began describing my growing business, James interrupted. "You know Mom keeps busy with a few rental properties," he said, quickly changing the subject to his recent promotion. That night marked the beginning of a pattern. Whenever we were around the Harrisons or their social circle, my accomplishments were minimized, my business reduced to a hobby. At first, I told myself James was just trying to fit in with his new family, that it would pass once he felt more secure in their world. But it never did. If anything, it got worse after they married. James and Bethany bought a large house in an expensive neighborhood that I knew he couldn't afford on his marketing salary. When I asked how they managed the down payment, he vaguely mentioned investments paying off. What he didn't mention was the $50,000 I had given him as a wedding gift, which I later discovered had gone entirely to their down payment. This pattern continued for years. James would call with casual mentions of financial pressure, a car loan with high interest, the cost of private school for my grandchildren, Madison and Lucas. And every time wanting to be supportive and ensure my grandchildren had opportunities, I would offer help. Sometimes it was direct money transfers, other times co-signing loans or paying off credit cards. All the while, James and Bethany maintained the fiction that they were self-made just like her parents. The painful irony was that I had actually built something from nothing, but in their narrative, my success was irrelevant. To the outside world, including extended family, James and Bethany were the power couple who had achieved the American dream through hard work and determination. The reality that my money funded their luxury vacations, their country club membership, and their children's private school tuition remained our secret, one that increasingly felt like a burden rather than a bond. Despite this, I maintained the relationship for my grandchildren. Madison, now 9, and Lucas, 7, were the lights of my life. I treasured our Sunday afternoon visits when James and Bethany would drop them off at my house while they went to brunch with friends. Those precious hours of baking cookies, building Lego structures, and hearing about their school adventures kept me tethered to a family that increasingly felt like it was slipping away. The incidents of disrespect had been escalating. My birthday in October went unacknowledged until I received a hastily purchased gift card 3 days later. When I had a health scare in November, a suspicious mammogram that thankfully turned out to be nothing, my calls to James went unanswered for 2 days. When he finally responded, he explained he had been in important meetings. His Instagram showed he had been at a golf tournament. Still, when the invitation to Christmas dinner arrived, I accepted. Family is family, I told myself. And I still hoped that somewhere underneath the facade James had constructed with Bethany, my son was still there. The son who had once been so proud of me, who had helped me renovate that first duplex, who had called me his inspiration. I spent weeks shopping for the perfect gifts. For Madison, I found a telescope she had been talking about for months. For Lucas, a complete set of adventure books by his favorite author. For James, an expensive watch I knew he had been eyeing. And for Bethany, a designer handbag from the brand she frequently mentioned. I wrapped each gift meticulously, adding personalized notes and special touches. Despite everything, I wanted them to feel my love through these gifts, to perhaps remember that family connections should transcend material success. As I prepared for the dinner, I had no idea that the evening would become a turning point not just in my relationship with my son and his wife, but in how I viewed myself and my place in this family I had sacrificed so much to support. The day of the Christmas dinner arrived with a light snowfall that dusted Portland in a layer of pristine white. I spent extra time getting ready, selecting a deep burgundy dress I had splurged on, and styling my silver hair in loose waves. Looking in the mirror, I saw a woman who had overcome widowhood to build a successful business, who had raised a son and now helped raise grandchildren. I deserved respect, I reminded myself, no matter what happened tonight. I loaded the carefully wrapped gifts into my 2-year-old Lexus, another purchase James had subtly mocked as trying too hard. The irony that he drove a much more expensive car, partially funded by me, wasn't lost on me. The drive to their suburban mansion took 30 minutes each mile, increasing the knot of anxiety in my stomach. James and Bethany House sat on a hill, overlooking the valley. A 6,000-square-foot modern construction with floor-to-ceiling windows and a circular driveway. As I pulled in, I noted the new landscaping and what appeared to be a recently installed fountain, more expenses that likely traced back to my financial assistance. I had barely put my car in park when the front door swung open and my grandchildren burst out, not bothered by the cold in their excitement. Grandma Rachelle Madison squealed, her long brown hair flying behind her as she ran toward me. Lucas was close behind, his gap-toothed smile warming my heart instantly. "My angels," I said, kneeling down to embrace them both despite my dress. "Have you both grown another inch since I saw you last weekend?" They giggled and began talking over each other, telling me about school performances and Christmas wishes. In these moments, all the tension with James and Bethany faded away. These children loved me unconditionally, and that was worth any price. The moment was broken by Bethany's voice from the doorway. "Kids, you'll catch cold. Let Grandma come inside." Her tone was pleasant enough, but there was always an undercurrent when she addressed me as Grandma, as if reminding me of my place. I was not Rachelle, the successful businesswoman, but merely the grandmother, a supporting character in their family story. I gathered my gifts and followed the children inside. The entryway opened to a soaring great room decorated for Christmas with a 14-foot tree dripping in gold and silver ornaments. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace, and the smell of roasting turkey filled the air. It was a picture-perfect Christmas scene, like something from a magazine spread. James appeared from the kitchen, a glass of wine in hand. His hug was brief, a formality. "Mom, glad you made it. Traffic." "Okay." Before I could answer, he was distracted by the arrival of Bethany parents. Gerald and Margaret Harrison made their entrance like visiting royalty. Gerald in a tailored suit, despite the family setting, and Margaret draped in cashmere and pearls. James Gerald boomed, clapping my son on the shoulder. "That driveway extension looks fantastic. Best investment you've made in this place." I bit my tongue, knowing that the driveway renovation had been funded by $10,000 I had given James for what he had called unexpected business expenses. Bethany's sister Allison arrived next with her husband Troy, both of them involved in Gerald car dealership business. Their twin boys, about the same age as Lucas, immediately joined my grandson in admiring the train set circling the Christmas tree. Several of Bethany cousins and their families completed the guest list. I recognized most of them from previous gatherings, though they rarely remembered me. To them, I was just James, mother-in-law, not worthy of much attention. As we moved to the formal living room for pre-dinner drinks, I noticed the new artwork on the walls pieces. I recognized from a gallery where prices started at 5 figures. More evidence of spending that didn't align with what I knew of James' income. Margaret Harrison settled beside me on the sofa, her posture rigid, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Rachelle, dear, that dress is lovely. Is it new?" The question seemed innocent, but I recognized the assessment. Yes, I treated myself for the holidays. I've had a good year with my business. "Oh yes, your little property thing." She waved her hand dismissively. Gerald gave a similar start to Bethany, father, you know, a single car lot that grew into an empire. There's something inspiring about humble beginnings, don't you think? Her condescension was thinly veiled, the implication clear that my business was not in the same league as her husband. If only she knew that my real estate holdings now included commercial properties across 3 states and a portfolio worth millions. From across the room, I could see James watching our interaction, a flash of discomfort crossing his face. He knew the truth about my success, but had chosen to perpetuate the fiction that I was just getting by. I caught his eye silently, asking why, but he quickly looked away, moving to refill Gerald's drink. As I placed my gifts under the tree, I noticed the abundance of presents already there, many with designer wrapping paper and elaborate bows. I carefully positioned my gifts, making sure they were visible but not taking center stage. The children watched with excitement, asking if they could open one early. Bethany quickly shut down that idea, reminding them that presents would come after dinner, as was tradition. Throughout the pre-dinner socializing, I observed how James transformed around the Harrisons. His language became more formal, his jokes more restrained. He name-dropped clients and mentioned deals in progress, creating the impression of a high-powered executive. This was not the son I had raised, who once valued authenticity above all. This was someone playing a role desperate for approval from his in-laws. Bethany orchestrated the gathering with precision, directing conversations and ensuring everything reflected the image she wanted to project. When she introduced me to a cousin who hadn't attended their wedding, she simply said, "This is James' mother," with no mention of my name or anything about me. I was an accessory, not a person with my own identity. As we finally moved to the dining room for dinner, I overheard Bethany telling her sister about their plans to renovate the master bathroom. "Just a little $70,000 refresh," she said casually. "Nothing major." I nearly choked on my wine. Just 3 weeks earlier, James had called asking if I could help with what he called a small house repair, mentioning a figure of $15,000. I had transferred the money without question, trusting him as always. Now I realized it had been for a luxury bathroom renovation that cost nearly 5 times what he had told me. The pieces were falling into place, and the picture they formed was breaking my heart. How long had this deception been going on? How much of their lifestyle was built on my hard-earned money, all while they diminished me and my accomplishments? As we took our seats at the elegantly set table, I felt a shift within me. Something would have to change, and perhaps this Christmas dinner would be the catalyst. The dining room table stretched nearly 12 feet long, covered in a cream-colored linen tablecloth with gold thread accents. Bethany had arranged the seating strategically, placing her parents at one end with James, while I was situated at the far opposite end between 2 of her cousins, whose names I could barely remember. My grandchildren were at a separate kids' table in the adjacent breakfast nook, too far for easy conversation. The table setting was elaborate with multiple wine glasses, several forks of different sizes, and fine china that I recognized as Harrison family heirlooms Bethany had mentioned repeatedly. Crystal candle holders with tall white tapers created a warm glow across the table, illuminating the excessive floral arrangements that must have cost hundreds of dollars. The catered meal began with servers' actual hired waitstaff bringing out the first course, a butternut squash soup garnished with truffle oil and microgreens. As everyone exclaimed over the presentation, Gerald raised his wine glass. "Before we begin this magnificent feast, I want to toast to success, to another record-breaking year at Harrison Motors, to James' promotion, and to the prosperity that allows us to gather in such style." He nodded toward his daughter. "And to Bethany for creating such an elegant evening." Glasses clinked all around as I took a small sip of my wine. Not a word about my contributions either to the family or my own accomplishments. It set the tone for the meal to come. As the soup bowls were cleared and replaced with salads of arugula, goat cheese, and candied walnuts, the conversation turned to business successes. Gerald dominated, initially describing how he had outmaneuvered a competitor to acquire a dealership in a prime location. "That property was practically worthless when I found it," he boasted. "The owner had no idea what he was sitting on. I offered him a fair price, flipped the business model, and now it's our most profitable location." I couldn't help but notice the parallels to my own strategy with undervalued properties, though I had always made sure owners received fair market value. Before I could comment, James jumped in. I used a similar approach with the Miller account, he said, directing his comments to Gerald. They were working with a smaller agency, but I showed them how our comprehensive marketing strategy could transform their brand. Signed them last month to a 2-year contract. 7 figures. I raised an eyebrow, knowing that James' company handled mid-sized local businesses, not the kind that signed 7-figure contracts. Was this another embellishment for his in-laws' benefit? Gerald clapped him on the shoulder. That sharp business sense runs in the Harrison family. My father always said you could spot value where others see nothing. James nodded as if taking credit for a genetic business acumen that apparently came from his wife, family, not the mother who had actually built a business from scratch. As the main course arrived, an elaborate spread of roast turkey prime rib and numerous side dishes, one of Bethany's cousins turned to me with what seemed like genuine interest. James mentioned you work in real estate. How is that going with the market these days? Before I could answer, Bethany interrupted from across the table. Oh, Mom just handles a few rental properties. Nothing too complicated. She turned to her cousin. Did you hear about the resort Allison and Troy are investing in, now that a real estate venture? I took a slow, deliberate bite of turkey to calm myself before responding. Actually, Thompson Real Estate Solutions now manages over 60 commercial and residential properties across Oregon, Washington, and Northern California. We just acquired a mixed-use development in Seattle that will be our largest project to date. A brief silence fell over the nearby conversations. James coughed uncomfortably, while Bethany's eyes narrowed slightly. How? Interesting, Margaret said with a tight smile. Though I imagine it must be difficult managing all that at your age. James mentioned you were considering scaling back soon. I nearly choked on my wine. This was news to me. I had never discussed retirement or scaling back with James or anyone else. If anything, I was exploring expansion opportunities. Actually, I said calmly, I just hired 2 new property managers to handle our growth. The business is more successful than ever. James quickly changed the subject, asking Gerald about his new boat. The conversation shifted, but I noticed several curious glances in my direction. Perhaps they were reassessing the narrative James and Bethany had constructed about me. As dinner progressed, I became increasingly aware of the dynamic. Whenever I spoke about my life or business, either James or Bethany would quickly redirect the conversation. It was as if my success threatened the image they wanted to project to the Harrisons, that of the self-made power couple who had achieved everything on their own. During a brief lull, Bethany's mother asked about my Christmas plans after today dinner. Oh, nothing special, I replied honestly. Probably just catching up on some reading and preparing for a property closing scheduled for next week. On Christmas, Margaret looked aghast. James, you shouldn't let your mother be alone on Christmas. James had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. We invited Mom to join us for our ski trip to Aspen after Christmas, but she declined. What he failed to mention was that the invitation had come just 2 days ago, clearly an afterthought, and with the caveat that I would need to book my own accommodations as their rental house was already full with the Harrisons. As dessert was served, an elaborate bûche de Noël, alongside various pies and cookies, I overheard Bethany whispering to James at the other end of the table. Remember the plan for the gifts, she said, not quite quietly enough. It will be perfect. James glanced in my direction, looking uncomfortable, but nodding in agreement. Something about their exchange sent a chill through me. What plan were they referring to? The meal concluded with coffee and liqueurs, the conversation growing louder as more alcohol was consumed. I nursed a single glass of wine, wanting to keep my wits about me. Something felt off about the evening beyond the usual tension and subtle put-downs. As we prepared to move to the living room for the gift exchange, I helped Madison straighten her dress and fixed Lucas' crooked bow tie. These moments with my grandchildren were precious, untainted by the adult complications. "Do you think I'll like my presents, Grandma?" Lucas asked, his eyes bright with excitement. "I'm sure you will, sweetheart," I replied, thinking of the adventure books wrapped under the tree. "And I hope you'll like what Grandma got you, too." Madison took my hand as we walked toward the living room. "I got you something special, Grandma. I made it myself." Her sincerity brought tears to my eyes. "Then it will be my favorite gift of all." Little did I know that the gift exchange to come would change everything, bringing to the surface years of resentment and setting in motion a confrontation that was long overdue. As we settled into the living room with the Christmas tree lights twinkling and presents piled high, I felt a growing certainty that this would not be the Christmas any of us had expected. The living room had been transformed into a Christmas wonderland. The enormous tree dominated one corner, its hundreds of white lights reflecting off the gold and silver ornaments. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace stockings, hung along the mantel, and Christmas music played softly from hidden speakers. Outside, snow continued to fall gently, creating the perfect holiday backdrop visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Bethany took center stage, directing everyone to their seats with the precision of a theater director. The Harrisons were given the most comfortable spots on the main sofa, while I was guided to an armchair partially blocked by the tree. The cousins and their children filled in the remaining spaces, everyone clutching drinks and looking expectantly toward the mountain of gifts. "We have a special system for gift distribution," Bethany announced, her voice carrying the practiced tone of someone who had rehearsed this speech. "Each family will take turns opening their gifts, starting with the youngest person. This way, we can all appreciate each gift properly." The gift opening began with the children naturally. Lucas and Madison ripped into packages with unbridled enthusiasm, exclaiming over new toys, games, and clothes. When they opened my gifts, the telescope and book set their genuine excitement warmed my heart. "Grandma, this is amazing," Madison gasped, examining the telescope with wonder. "Can we set it up tonight to look at the stars?" "These are the exact books I wanted," Lucas added, flipping through the collection. "How did you know?" Before I could respond, Bethany interjected. "Let's show Grandma what we got you," directing their attention to larger packages bearing her and James' names. The children dutifully shifted their focus, opening elaborate electronic gifts from their parents. I noticed how Bethany emphasized "we" when referring to gifts from her and James, creating a unified front of parental generosity. My gifts, while appreciated by the children, were quickly overshadowed by the bigger, more expensive presents. The gift opening continued around the room. Bethany parents received multiple packages from James and Bethany, including a weekend getaway to a luxury spa and golf resort. Allison and Troy were given expensive bottles of scotch and designer accessories. Even the more distant cousins received thoughtfully selected gifts from my son and his wife. As each family unit completed their turn, I noticed something concerning. Everyone had received gifts from James and Bethany, and I had watched as my gifts to others were opened with varying degrees of appreciation. But as the pile under the tree dwindled, I realized with growing discomfort that I hadn't received anything yet. Madison, perceptive as always, looked around with a furrowed brow. "Where are Grandma Rachelle gifts?" she asked innocently. "Everybody else got presents." A moment of awkward silence fell over the room. James and Bethany exchanged a look that confirmed my worst suspicion. This was no oversight. This was deliberate. James cleared his throat. "Oh, Mom," he said with exaggerated surprise. "We must have misplaced yours. I'm sure they're around here somewhere." The fakeness in his voice was unmistakable. Next to him, Bethany's lips curved in a barely concealed smirk. "So sorry about that, Rachelle. Maybe they got lost in all the shuffle." I sat perfectly still, the realization washing over me like ice water. This had been planned. The whispered conversation about the plan during dinner, the strategic seating arrangement that kept me partly hidden, it had all been leading to this moment of public humiliation. Around the room, reactions varied. Gerald and Margaret looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Allison shot her sister a disapproving glance. The cousins busied themselves with their gifts, pretending not to notice the tension. My grandchildren looked confused and upset. "But Grandma should have presents too," Lucas insisted, his lower lip trembling slightly. "Everybody gets presents on Christmas." The innocence of his statement highlighted the cruelty of the situation. Even a 7-year-old understood the basic fairness that his grandmother was being denied. "I'm sure it was just an oversight, honey," Bethany said dismissively. "Grandma doesn't mind, do you, Rachelle?" All eyes turned to me. In that moment, I felt the weight of years of disrespect, of being taken for granted, of financial exploitation disguised as family support. I saw clearly how James and Bethany had systematically diminished me while benefiting from my generosity. I understood that this public humiliation was the culmination of a pattern, not an isolated incident. Something shifted inside me. The hurt was still there, but rising above it was a newfound resolve. I had built a successful business from nothing after losing my husband. I had faced challenges far greater than this petty attempt to embarrass me. I deserved better, and it was time everyone in this room understood that. "Actually," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "It okay." I knew the words would surprise them, but what came next would shock them even more. I got myself something this year. James looked relieved clearly, expecting me to play along and minimize the situation. Bethany's smile remained fixed, though her eyes narrowed slightly. I reached into my handbag and pulled out a cream-colored envelope. For a moment I hesitated. What I was about to do would irrevocably change my relationship with my son and his wife. But sometimes truth is necessary for healing to begin. "I've been reflecting a lot lately on my financial priorities," I said, my voice growing stronger with each word, and I realized it was time to put everything in proper perspective. The room grew quiet. Even the children sensed something significant was happening. You see, I continued opening the envelope and removing several sheets of paper. I've been keeping careful records of my financial contributions to James and Bethany over the years. I thought Christmas would be the perfect time to share this gift of clarity with everyone. James' face drained of color. "Mom," he began, but I held up my hand, silencing him with a look. "Let me finish, James. I think it important that everyone understands exactly what's been happening in our family." And with that, I began to reveal the truth that would leave the entire room in shocked silence, forever changing the dynamics of our family. The room had fallen completely silent. Even the Christmas music seemed to have faded into the background, as all eyes fixed on me and the papers in my hand. I took a deep breath, knowing there was no turning back now. "Let me start with the house," I said calmly. "This beautiful home we're sitting in right now. James and Bethany have told everyone they purchased it through their hard work and smart investments. The truth is that I provided the $150,000 down payment. I have the wire transfer records right here." I held up the first document, though I didn't pass it around. This wasn't about embarrassing them with evidence, just stating facts. James' face had gone from pale to flushed. "Mom, this isn't the time or place." "Actually, I think this is exactly the right time and place," I countered. "Just as you thought this was the appropriate setting to intentionally exclude me from the gift exchange." Bethany jumped in, her voice sharp. "Rachelle, you're making a scene over a simple oversight. If you're that hurt about not getting a present, we can fix that tomorrow." "This isn't about presents, Bethany. This is about respect and honesty. Let me continue." I turned to the next page in my documentation. "The luxury SUV in your garage, the one you told everyone was a bonus. From your company, James I, co-signed that loan and have been making half the payments for the past 3 years. That comes to $36,000 so far." Gerald Harrison shifted uncomfortably on the sofa, looking at James with new eyes. Margaret's hand fluttered to her pearl necklace. "Madison and Lucas private school tuition," I continued. $25,000 per year per child. I've covered half of that for the past 4 years. That another $100,000. Bethany stood up abruptly. "This is completely inappropriate. Children go upstairs to play with your new toys." Madison and Lucas looked uncertainly between their mother and me, clearly confused by the tension in the room. "I think the children should stay," I said firmly. "They should know that their grandmother loves them enough to ensure they get the best education, even when it means sacrificing my own comfort." Bethany's face contorted with anger, but before she could speak, her father intervened. "Let her finish," Bethany Gerald said, his businessman instincts clearly engaged by the financial disclosures. "I want to hear what else Rachelle has to say." "Thank you, Gerald," I said with a nod. "Their last-minute vacations to Cabo when your anniversary plans fell through. The emergency $10,000 when your roof supposedly needed repairs, though I now understand that money went toward your bathroom renovation. The country club membership I subsidized as a business expense so you could network with clients." I flipped through more pages, highlighting instance after instance where my financial support had been disguised, minimized, or completely hidden from others. As I spoke, I could see the reactions rippling through the room. Allison was whispering to her husband, her expression a mix of shock and vindication. The cousins looked uncomfortably at their own gifts, perhaps wondering if they too had been purchased with my money. "But what truly hurts isn't the money," I said, my voice softening slightly. "It, the dishonesty. It, the way you've diminished my success and my contributions while benefiting from both. It, the fact that you've created this narrative where you're self-made when the truth is very different." I set the financial documents aside and pulled out another sheet of paper. This one was from my accountant. "What many of you don't know is that Thompson Real Estate Solutions isn't just a few rental properties. Last year, my company grossed just over $4 million in revenue. I currently own 67 properties across 3 states, including commercial developments, apartment complexes, and several historic buildings being renovated into mixed-use spaces. I employ 22 people full-time and contract with dozens more." The shock on Gerald and Margaret's faces was almost comical. They had clearly bought into James and Bethany's narrative about my modest business endeavors. "I'm not sharing this to brag," I continued. "I'm sharing this because for years, James and Bethany have benefited from my success while simultaneously diminishing it. They've taken my financial support while pretending to be entirely self-sufficient. And tonight they thought it was appropriate to humiliate me by excluding me from the gift exchange, as if I mean nothing to this family that I've sacrificed so much to support." James finally found his voice. "Mom, you're making it sound like we've been using you. You offered that money. You wanted to help us." "Yes, I did want to help you," I agreed. because that's what mothers do. But I never expected my generosity to be met with disrespect and dishonesty. I never thought you'd use my money to create a lifestyle while pretending I wasn't integral to making it possible. I turned to face the entire room now. I've made some decisions that I want to share with all of you since we're family, and apparently family business is open for discussion at Christmas dinner. First, I'm establishing educational trusts for Madison and Lucas. These trusts will cover their college expenses and any graduate education they pursue. This money is for them directly and cannot be accessed by anyone else. I glanced at my grandchildren who were watching with wide eyes, not fully understanding the adult tension, but sensing its importance. Second, I will no longer be providing direct financial support to James and Bethany. No more loans, no more gifts disguised as business expenses, no more payments toward your mortgage or car loans. It's time for truly independent living. Bethany's face flushed with anger. You can't just cut us off because your feelings are hurt over a Christmas present. This isn't about a present, Bethany, I said calmly. This is about years of disrespect and dishonesty. And I'm not cutting you off. I'm simply stopping the extra financial support that you claim not to need anyway, according to the image you present to everyone. I turned to the final page in my documents. Finally, I want everyone to know that I've decided to significantly increase my philanthropic giving. This year, I'm donating $200,000 to organizations supporting women, entrepreneurs, and small business development. I'm also establishing a scholarship fund for students who have lost a parent to help them pursue their education and build their own success stories. The room remained silent as the implications of my words sank in. I wasn't just asserting boundaries. I was revealing myself as someone with substantial means and influence, someone who had been systematically underestimated and undervalued by her own family. I carefully returned the papers to my envelope and looked directly at James. I love you. You're my son, and nothing will ever change that. But love doesn't mean allowing yourself to be disrespected and exploited. It doesn't mean silently accepting dishonesty. Real love includes boundaries and truth. James couldn't meet my eyes. Beside him, Bethany was seething, her carefully constructed image crumbling before the extended family she had worked so hard to impress. I stood up, smoothing my burgundy dress. I think I'll head home now. Madison, Lucas, I love you both very much. I'll see you soon for our regular Sunday visit, if that's still acceptable. Lucas ran to hug me, wrapping his arms around my waist. Don't go, Grandma. We didn't even have dessert yet. I knelt down to his level. Sometimes grown-ups need space to think about things, sweetheart. But I'm never far away, and I'll always be your grandmother who loves you more than anything. As I prepared to leave, Gerald Harrison surprised me by standing as well. Let me walk you to your car, Rachelle. The gesture wasn't lost on anyone in the room. The patriarch of the Harrison family was showing me respect that my own son had failed to demonstrate. As we walked toward the door, the room behind us erupted into hushed conversations, the fallout of my revelation already beginning. What I didn't realize then was that this was just the start of the confrontation. The immediate aftermath would prove even more challenging than the revelation itself, testing relationships and forcing long overdue conversations that would forever change our family dynamics. Gerald Harrison walked me to the front door in silence, his expression thoughtful. As we reached the entryway, he finally spoke. I had no idea, Rachelle, about any of it. I nodded, appreciating his candor. I didn't expect you to. James and Bethany worked hard to maintain their image. Gerald looked back toward the living room where we could hear raised voices. My daughter can be status conscious. Margaret and I may have contributed to that. But what they did tonight, and apparently have been doing for years, goes beyond that. It's dishonest. I appreciated his acknowledgement, but didn't want to put him in the middle of a family conflict. You don't need to take sides, Gerald. This is between me, my son, and his wife. He shook his head. When someone intentionally excludes a family member from Christmas gifts as some sort of power play, while simultaneously benefiting from that person, financial support, it reflects on all of us who were present. Margaret and I didn't raise Bethany to behave this way. As we spoke, the sound of hurried footsteps approached. James appeared in the hallway, his face flushed, and his expression a mix of anger and embarrassment. "Mom, you can't just drop a bomb like that and leave," he said, his voice strained. "We need to talk about this." Gerald gave James a disapproving look. "I'll give you two some privacy." He turned to me. "Rachelle had been illuminating meeting the real you tonight. I hope we'll have the chance to speak again under better circumstances." With that, he returned to the living room, leaving me alone with my son in the marble-floored entryway. The moment Gerald was out of earshot, James' demeanor changed. "What the hell was that?" he demanded, keeping his voice low but intense. "You humiliated us in front of everyone." "Did I?" I asked calmly. "Or did I simply tell the truth that you've been hiding? You had no right to air our private financial arrangements." "No right," I repeated, feeling my own anger rising now. "You and Bethany deliberately excluded me from the gift exchange to humiliate me in front of the entire family. You've spent years taking my money while diminishing my success. And you think I had no right to speak the truth?" "It wasn't deliberate," he protested weakly. "We just forgot." I gave him a look that said I wasn't born yesterday. "James, I raised you better than to lie to my face. I heard Bethany discussing the plan with you during dinner. This was calculated, and we both know it." Before he could respond, Bethany stormed into the hallway, her carefully applied makeup now smudged from angry tears. "How dare you?" she hissed. "You've ruined everything. My parents are in there, questioning every decision we've ever made. Allison is looking at me like I'm some kind of fraud. Even the cousins are whispering." "Maybe they're whispering because they just learned the truth," I suggested. "That the lifestyle you've been flaunting isn't entirely self-made." Bethany's face contorted with rage. "So what if you helped us? That what family does, parents help their children. It doesn't give you the right to control us or embarrass us." Her words struck me as so profoundly disconnected from reality that I almost laughed. "Is that what you think this is about control, Bethany? I've spent years quietly supporting you both, never asking for recognition, never demanding anything in return. All I ever wanted was basic respect." James jumped in, his tone slightly more conciliatory now. "Mom, of course we respect you. But you have to understand how it looks when you talk about your business success all the time. It makes people uncomfortable." I stared at him, truly seeing for the first time how warped his perspective had become. "When exactly do I talk about my business success? All the time, James. When I'm specifically asked about my work and try to answer before being interrupted. When I occasionally mention a new property acquisition that I'm proud of. The truth is, I've been downplaying my success for years to protect your ego." "That not true," he protested. "Isn't it? When was the last time you asked me about my business? When was the last time you showed any interest in what I've built? You're happy to take my money, but you don't want to acknowledge where it comes from, because it doesn't fit the narrative you've created." From the living room, we could hear Madison's voice asking loudly why everyone was upset and why Grandma was leaving. The innocent question seemed to pierce through James' defenses, and I saw a flicker of shame cross his face. Bethany wasn't ready to back down. Fine, so we should have gotten you a Christmas present. That an oversight, not a capital offense. You didn't have to destroy our reputation with my family over it. This isn't about a present, I said, my patience finally wearing thin. This is about years of disrespect. This is about taking financial support while pretending to be self-sufficient. This is about deliberately humiliating me in front of everyone to assert some kind of twisted dominance. The present was just the final straw. James ran his hand through his hair, a gesture he'd had since childhood when feeling cornered. Mom, you're overreacting. We appreciate everything you've done for us. Do you? I asked quietly. Because appreciation usually comes with acknowledgement, gratitude, and respect. I haven't seen much of any of those things lately. Our conversation was interrupted by Lucas appearing in the hallway, his small face creased with worry. Daddy, why is everyone fighting? Why is Grandma leaving? James knelt down to his son level. It adult stuff, buddy. Everything fine. Grandma just needs to go home early. I am not fine, Lucas said with the directness. Only children can manage. You forgot to give Grandma presents. That not nice. Out of the mouths of babes. The simple moral clarity of a 7-year-old cut through all the adult justifications and excuses. Bethany stepped forward to usher Lucas back to the living room. Go back to playing with your new toys, sweetie. Mommy and Daddy need to talk to Grandma. As she guided him away, Lucas looked back at me with sad eyes. I'll share my books with you, Grandma. You can have one if you want. His generosity brought tears to my eyes. Thank you, Lucas. That very kind. But those books are for you to enjoy. Grandma has plenty at home. Once Lucas was out of earshot, James' tone softened slightly. Look, Mom, maybe we haven't been as appreciative as we should have been. And yes, maybe the gift thing tonight was petty. Bethany was upset about some comments you made last time about her redecorating the guest room. I remembered the conversation. I had simply asked if the extensive renovation was necessary since the room was rarely used. I hadn't realized my practical question had wounded Bethany's pride so deeply that she'd orchestrate a public humiliation in response. So this was revenge for a perceived slight, I asked. That even worse, James. Bethany returned, having deposited Lucas with his cousins. We don't have to stand here and be lectured, she said to James. This is our home, and she coming in here attacking us. I'm not attacking anyone, I said firmly. I'm setting boundaries and speaking truth after years of silence. They're a difference. Fine, Bethany snapped. If boundaries are what you want, then here a boundary for you. If you can't support our choices without criticism, maybe you should reconsider your role in this family. The implied threat was clear. She was suggesting limiting my access to my grandchildren. It was the nuclear option, and she knew it. I looked at my son, waiting to see if he would stand up to this threat. His eyes darted between his wife and me, conflict evident in his expression. But he remained silent, his lack of response speaking volumes. I see, I said quietly. Well, that certainly clarifies things. I gathered my coat from the nearby closet and put it on with deliberate calm. If you're willing to use my grandchildren as pawns in this power struggle, then we have even bigger problems than I thought. I hope you'll reconsider once you've had time to reflect on everything that happened tonight. Mom, wait, James finally said, a note of panic in his voice. Nobody is saying you can't see the kids. Aren't they? I asked, looking pointedly at Bethany, because that sounded exactly like what was being implied. Bethany crossed her arms defensively. I'm just saying that we need to establish some ground rules going forward. I nodded slowly. Yes, we do. And my ground rules are simple. I expect basic respect as a person and as a mother. I expect honesty about financial matters. And I expect that my relationship with my grandchildren will be valued, not used as leverage when you're upset with me. James looked torn, the conflict between his wife expectations and his relationship with his mother playing out across his face. From the living room, we could hear Gerald's voice rising, clearly unhappy about something. The fallout from my revelation was spreading through the extended family. I think I should go before this escalates further, I said, reaching for the door handle. James, we'll talk when things have calmed down. Please tell Madison and Lucas that I love them and I'll see them soon. As I stepped outside into the snowy evening, I heard footsteps behind me and turned to see Allison, Bethany's sister, hurrying out with a small package in her hand. Rachelle, wait, she called. I just wanted to say, I've always thought you were amazing. The way you built your business after losing your husband, how you've always been there for James and the kids. What happened tonight wasn't right. She pressed the package into my hands. It nothing special, just some artisan chocolates I picked up, but I wanted you to have something to open on Christmas morning. Her kindness, unexpected in the midst of such conflict, brought fresh tears to my eyes. Thank you, Allison. That means more than you know. As I drove home through the gently falling snow, my emotions swung between hurt, anger, relief, and uncertainty. The confrontation had been necessary, but the aftermath would be complicated. Relationships had been damaged, truths exposed, and boundaries established. What remained to be seen was whether healing could follow, whether the foundation of honesty I'd forced into the open could support a healthier family dynamic going forward. One thing was, certain things would never go back to the way they were before. And despite the pain of the evening, I knew that was ultimately for the best. As I pulled into my driveway, I felt a strange sense of lightness. The burden of silent resentment and unacknowledged exploitation had been lifted. Whatever came next, I would face it with the same strength and dignity that had carried me through widowhood and into success. The journey ahead might be difficult, but at 67, I was long past fearing difficult journeys. 6 months passed after that fateful Christmas dinner. The winter snow melted into spring rains, and spring blossomed into the warmth of early summer. In that time, much had changed both within me and in my relationships with my family. The initial weeks after Christmas had been difficult. James and Bethany maintained a chilly distance, and my regular Sunday afternoons with Madison and Lucas were temporarily suspended. Bethany claimed the children were too busy with weekend activities, but I recognized the excuse for what it was punishment for my truth-telling. Instead of allowing despair to overtake me, I channeled my energy into positive directions. I expanded my business, acquiring 2 new commercial properties and hiring additional staff. I moved forward with my philanthropic plans, establishing the scholarship fund for students who had lost a parent and partnering with a women business organization to provide mentorship to aspiring entrepreneurs. In February, I received an unexpected call from Gerald Harrison. He and Margaret were in town for business and wanted to meet for lunch. Curious about their intentions, I agreed. We met at an upscale restaurant downtown, and I was surprised by their warmth and genuine interest in my life and business. As we finished our meals, Gerald addressed the elephant in the room. "Rachelle, what happened at Christmas opened our eyes to a lot of things," he said. "Margaret and I have done some soul-searching about the values we instilled in our daughters." Margaret nodded in agreement. We emphasized material success and social standing, perhaps at the expense of honesty and genuine relationships. Seeing how Bethany treated you, someone who had been so generous and supportive, made us question our own priorities. Their candor touched me. "We all want the best for our children," I replied. "Sometimes it's hard to know what that really means." Gerald leaned forward. "We've spoken to Bethany about her behavior. I can't say she was receptive at first, but I think our words are beginning to sink in. James, too, seems to be reconsidering things." I appreciated their intervention, but remained cautious about getting my hopes up. Time would tell whether any real change was possible. In March, I received a text from James asking if we could meet for coffee. Alone. We arranged to meet at a small cafe halfway between our homes. When I arrived, James was already there, looking more subdued than I'd seen him in years. Gone was the polished executive image he typically projected. Instead, he seemed thoughtful, even vulnerable. "Mom," he began, "after we'd received our drinks, I've been doing a lot of thinking since Christmas. At first I was just angry and embarrassed. But the more time passed, the more I realized you were right about most of what you said." I listened without interrupting, allowing him the space to continue. "Bethany and I had a lot of fights after that night. She wanted to cut ties with you completely, but I couldn't do that. You're my mother, and despite everything I know how much you've done for us, for me." He took a deep breath. "The truth is, I got caught up in a lifestyle and image that wasn't really mine. I wanted to impress Bethany parents to feel like I belonged in their world. And somewhere along the way, I started believing our own story, that we'd achieved everything through our own efforts." Hearing him acknowledge this brought a sense of vindication, but also sadness for the years we'd lost to this fiction. "I'm sorry, Mom," he continued, "for taking your support for granted, for diminishing your accomplishments, and especially for that Christmas dinner. You're right, it was deliberate and it was cruel." His apology seemed genuine, and I felt something tight within me begin to loosen. "Thank you for saying that, James. I've missed you. And especially the children." He nodded. "They've missed you too. Lucas asks about you all the time. Bethany is still processing everything, but she's agreed that keeping you from the kids isn't right." It was a start. We agreed to begin rebuilding our relationship gradually, starting with reinstating my Sunday afternoons with the grandchildren. April brought the first of these reunions. When James dropped Madison and Lucas off at my house that Sunday, there was still awkwardness between us, but the children showed no such reservation. They bounded into my arms with enthusiasm, eager to tell me about everything I'd missed in their lives. "Grandma, I got the lead in the school play," Madison announced proudly. "And I won the science fair with my volcano project," Lucas added. "Daddy helped, but I did most of it myself." Their joy and innocence were healing balms to my spirit. We spent the afternoon baking cookies, playing board games, and simply enjoying each other's company. When James returned to pick them up, he seemed surprised by their reluctance to leave. "Maybe next Sunday they could stay for dinner," he suggested tentatively. "And maybe I could stay too." It was an olive branch, and I accepted it gladly. "We're having lasagna. It always was your favorite." The following months brought a gradual thawing in relations. Sunday dinners became a regular occurrence, sometimes with just James, and the children occasionally, with Bethany joining as well. Her attitude toward me remained cool but civil, which was an improvement over open hostility. In May, I received another surprise. Allison, Bethany's sister, reached out to ask if I would mentor her in real estate investment. She had capital from her work in her father's business, but wanted to diversify and build something of her own. I really admire what you've created, Rachelle, she told me during our first meeting. Building a multi-million-dollar business from scratch after losing your husband that takes incredible strength and business acumen. Her sincere admiration contrasted sharply with the dismissive attitude I'd encountered from her family in the past. We began meeting regularly, and I found unexpected joy in sharing my knowledge and experience with someone eager to learn. By June, a new normal had established itself. My relationship with James was healing, though we were careful to avoid discussing financial matters at first. My connection with my grandchildren was stronger than ever. Bethany remained distant, but had stopped actively trying to exclude me from family events. Most importantly, I had reclaimed my sense of self-worth. No longer was I the silent supporter, the background figure whose contributions were minimized. I stood firmly in my own accomplishments, neither boastful nor apologetic about my success. On a warm evening in late June, James came to my house alone after dropping the children off with a babysitter. He seemed nervous as he sat on my patio declining the glass of wine I offered. "Mom, there's something I need to tell you," he began. "Bethany and I are selling the house." I raised an eyebrow, surprised by this news. The house had been their pride and joy, the physical manifestation of the image they'd worked so hard to project. "We can't afford it anymore," he admitted. "Without your financial help, and with the country club dues and private school tuition, we've been living beyond our means for years." His candor was refreshing. "What will you do?" "We're looking at smaller homes in good school districts. Something within our actual budget." He gave a rueful smile. "Bethany isn't thrilled, but she's coming around to the idea. Her parents have offered to help, but I've decided it's time we truly stand on our own feet." I felt a surge of pride at his decision. "That takes courage, James. Real courage." He nodded, then reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. "This is for you." It not much, just the beginning, really. Inside was a check for $5,000 and a handwritten note. "The first repayment for all you've done. There will be more as we're able." I tried to refuse, but he was adamant. "It not just about the money, Mom. It about acknowledging the truth and taking responsibility. Please accept it." That night after James left, I sat on my patio watching the sunset and reflecting on the journey of the past 6 months. The painful confrontation at Christmas had been necessary, a catalyst for change that could not have happened without the truth being spoken aloud. I thought about the wisdom that comes with age and experience, about how standing up for oneself isn't selfish, but essential for healthy relationships. I considered how financial generosity without boundaries can sometimes enable dysfunction rather than provide support. Most of all, I contemplated the nature of family, how the bonds between us can be stretched and tested, but never truly broken when love remains at the foundation. James and I were finding our way back to an authentic relationship, one built on mutual respect, rather than financial dependency. Bethany might never fully embrace me, but we were learning to coexist peacefully for the sake of the children we both loved. As for me, at 67, I had discovered a new chapter opening in my life. My business continued to thrive. My mentorship of Allison and other aspiring entrepreneurs brought fresh purpose, and my relationship with my grandchildren flourished. The scholarship fund I'd established was already changing lives, creating ripples of positive impact beyond my immediate circle. The truth I'd learned through this difficult journey was that real wealth isn't measured in dollars or possessions. It isn't reflected in the size of your home or the exclusivity of your social circle. Real wealth lies in authentic relationships, in standing in your truth, and in the knowledge that you've made a positive difference in the lives of others. That Christmas dinner had been painful but necessary. It had stripped away pretense and forced honesty into the light. And from that difficult truth, telling something healthier and more genuine, was gradually emerging proof that even in our 60s, growth and new beginnings are not only possible but essential. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who took you for granted? What boundaries did you set, and how did it change your relationships? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real-life stories about family dynamics, personal growth, and standing in your truth. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's never too late to demand the respect you deserve and create the life you truly want.